Okay, good evening. So as I said, we'll try to learn a little bit on Megillat Esther. What I want to share with you primarily is something that I learned from, I have two main teachers in Tanakh that I study Tanakh from. One is my father-in-law, Rav Yosef Carmel. And most, I think I mentioned in the past, most of what I speak about in Yeshayahu, I take from him. He's written a book on Yeshayahu. The other rabbi for Tanakh that I studied a lot from, his name is Rav Elchanan Samet. We used to, he still teaches actually in the yeshiva in Ma'ale Adumim, and he's authored a good number of books, both on Parashat Shavua, on Tanakh, on Tehillim, on various subjects, and he's also an outstanding speaker as well. At times too outstanding, because sometimes you can get carried away with the speaking and then lose the content, so to speak. But he's really excellent, and I heard in the past some excellent shiurim from him on Megillat Esther. So I'll try to share at least some of what I remember from those shiurim. I thought his analysis was very good.
Sorry, what was the name of the Rav?
Rav Elchanan Samet. Samet. If you, I don't think he has anything in English, but if you go online, you can find articles of his in Hebrew, and he's published several.
Is that Sadi? Summit?
Samet. Sin, not Sin. Samech Mem Det. Elchanan Samet.
Yeah. Is he Israeli or is he American?
He's Israeli. No, he's Israeli. He's from Kfar Etzion.
Yeah, I have heard of the Rav, yes.
You can catch him in Hebrew. He's all, like I said, he's an excellent speaker and an excellent writer. Really, really fantastic. So, okay, so let's get started on Megillat Esther. So first of all, who would you say is sort of the main character of the Megillah, the one that appears from the beginning of the story to the end?
Mordechai.
Again, I'm asking not in terms of quality, so to speak, but in terms of quantity. Who is the figure that remains consistent throughout all the stories of the Megillah, from the beginning to the end? Achashverosh, very good. Why? Because if the Megillah starts off with a story, the first story that we have in the Megillah is about Achashverosh.
Okay, yes.
There isn't yet Mordechai and Esther there yet. They haven't appeared on the scene. Even Haman, although there is somebody there mentioned, Memuchan, that Chazal say is Haman, but even he doesn't appear. So Achashverosh is the one that starts off the story, seemingly with a whole very peculiar event that ended up with the dethroning of Vashti. And also the Megillah ends with something very peculiar about Achashverosh. Anybody remember what's the very end of the Megillah?
We still pay taxes to Achashverosh. Adayin Avdei Achashverosh.
Yes, we have at the end of the Megillah, after seemingly the whole story is over, it's mentioned that Achashverosh levied the taxes. And I remember as a child growing up in America, as much as they would make noise when they say the name of Haman, but once they mention the taxes of Achashverosh, everybody would also boo. American tradition is to hate taxes. Maybe that shouldn't be mentioned in the British crowd, but although I believe the taxes they pay now are much, much higher than the ones that they caused them to call for independence from England. But anyway, that's another story. So Achashverosh is Lichora seems to be the main figure. So that's one point we have to think about. Why is the seemingly everything ultimately begin and end with Achashverosh? Second question I would like to ask you: the story of Haman. How long did it actually last? I'm not talking about the entire Megillah, but the actual story with Haman. How long did the events take to transpire?
About a year.
What?
It was about a year, because it was, I'm very bad with dates, but it was a long time from the pour until the actual, the date fell
from the date that he made his he rolled the dice, so to speak, to come up with the date for the killing of the Jews, until actually that date arrived was a year. Haman himself, though, how long did he take till he was hung?
Not so long. Sivan, Thomas.
Let's think about it. Anybody remember the story? What happened? He came to Achashverosh with his great plan to kill all the Jews. He convinced Achashverosh that they were not necessary, plus he added a hefty sum to go to the royal bank. And he rolled the dice on the date, which came out 12 months. He was in the month of Nisan, the 13th of the month of Nisan. He made his lottery, and he came up 12 months later for the 13th of Adar. Then what happened? What was the next event that happened after Achashverosh agreed?
The 3 feasts.
With Esther.
Yeah.
Yeah, so let's think about what happened. So Achashverosh comes out with a decree, they begin spreading the message. Who hears about it? One of the first people to hear about it is
Mordechai.
Mordechai. Why? Where was Mordechai?
He's in the court.
Yeah, Sha'ar HaMelech, which literally translates as Margaret said, the gate. Although we often find that Sha'ar in Tanakh means the court. So it could be that Mordechai had some sort of, apparently it seems like he had some sort of position within the Ministry of Justice of Achashverosh. Okay, he wasn't a random person off the street. He was involved there. So Mordechai hears about it. What does he do?
Tears his clothes.
He tears his clothes, and then what happens?
He tells Esther.
So the message gets sent to Esther. She asks why you're telling. He sends the message to Esther. He tells her she has to do it. She's a little hesitant at first, then she agrees. Okay, so then what does she ask for?
She asked to get everybody to come and fast and pray.
So she asked all the Jews to fast for how long?
3 days.
3 days, very good. On the 3rd day, that's the day that she goes to see Achashverosh. And she invites him to a party, a feast, as is customary in Shushan. What happens at that feast?
She asked him to come back again the next day.
She doesn't tell him what it's about. She invites him to another feast the next day. So again, let's just calculate the times that we said so far. Mordechai hears about it, probably immediately. Okay, and probably not more than a day or so, if maybe less. He gets word to Esther. Esther asks for 3 days, and on the 3rd day, she's already approaching Achashverosh. So we're probably around 3 or 4 days after Haman asks for his sealed the deal with Achashverosh, right? Now she invites Achashverosh to the feast on the next day. Achashverosh at night has what happens to him during the night?
He can't sleep.
He can't sleep. He can't fall asleep. He's asking for to read his book of where all the chronicles. He discovers that he never repaid Mordechai for the favor of revealing to him the plot of Biktan Vateresh. And then we have the whole story of Haman showing up. Haman also, what are Haman's events in during that night? Just everybody remind us.
What was it? Oh, because Mordechai wouldn't bow down to him.
Yeah, what has he done in this night as well? He
made the gallows.
Right, so he's got his big tree, his gallows prepared for Mordechai. He shows up to Achashverosh the next day. What does Achashverosh tell Haman to do?
To put Mordechai, well, he asks him to read the book.
No, he does the book at night. He discovers. Then
he asked him to get the white horse. Exactly what Haman.
Yeah, he's got to get right. So he's putting Mordechai on the horse, etc. From that whole event where Haman is embarrassed by having to march in front of Mordechai on the horse and yelling, "So shall be done to the person who the king seeks his favor, his glory." From there, Haman gets invited to the second feast of Esther, right? He was the 2 guests were at that feast, Achashverosh and Esther. During that feast, what does Esther do?
He asks her. Achashverosh goes out into the garden.
Right,
Oh,
during that feast,
Oh, no, yes. Esther actually almost reveals to Haman, to Achashverosh. She reveals to Achashverosh, he's so angry, and he walks out into the garden.
right, so Esther
then-
basically accuses Haman of plotting to kill her and all her nation. Achashverosh gets very angry at that, and then at that opportune time, Charvona, right, shows up and says to Achashverosh, and here is also the tree that Haman prepared for Mordechai. And Achashverosh says, hang him on that tree, and Haman is hanged. So this was about, just from a simple reading of the Megillah, but the Talmud also says this, 4 days after the whole Haman started, he was dead. That's it. Now, you're granted, there was still danger because of the king's the decree of the king that all the Jews will be killed had already been issued. So they needed to find a way to somehow thwart that, and they came up with a way, and that's what happened a year later, or a little 12 months later, that the Jews were allowed to fight against their enemies, and ultimately they won. But Haman himself, the whole story was over in just a few days. It's unbelievable. Okay.
Yeah.
If you think about it that way, within the 4 days approximately of when he got his whole plan into motion, he was already hung and dead, and his story was over. So it's really quite incredible, these events. And what I want to do is sort of to try to look into what exactly happened here, and then also maybe try to understand what the message is, why we're so celebrating, because it seems like, granted, there was a grave danger during that time of Mordechai. Obviously, Haman's plans were horrific, but they never really got off the ground. I mean, if he was dead within 4 days, then it could have been just a fleeting episode that nobody would have remembered. Okay, but for some reason, we celebrate it to this day, and it's one of the biggest celebrations of the year. So the question is, what's going on here? And again, as we said, it all starts out with Achashverosh. Okay, so to try to analyze the story and what happened here, we have to sort of get into the figure of Achashverosh and try to find out what's his mind. Okay, so let's look first of all at the first story that we have in the Megillah. And that is the beginning of the Megillah. Sorry about that. Okay, so the story starts off, Achashverosh, he's the king. He's got this tremendous empire, the Persian Empire, 127 states, from Hodu, from India, all the way to Kush, which is there in Africa after Egypt. Okay, really a tremendous empire, basically almost the entire world of that time. And what does he do? He makes a huge party for all the important people, which lasts 180 days to show them how grand his kingdom is. And following that partying of 180 days, he makes another 7-day party just for the people who are in Shushan Habira, okay? And what is he trying to achieve by all these partyings? Anybody have a suggestion?
Show off his kingdom, to boast about the kingdom. I mean,
right, so he's boasting about the empire, but what's he really trying to achieve? What's the political aim of such a party?
Unity amongst all his, It's unity.
Unity, and if you have such an empire, what are you most afraid of?
Not being conquered.
Your enemies.
Yeah, you're conquered. You're afraid of both enemies. Yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Show people his strength.
You want to show your strength, exactly. So you, again, think about it. He's making one party all the states, and then he's got another party just for the people within Shushan Abira. Just to explain, from what a little bit I read historically on Shushan, there was the city Shushan, and within Shushan there was Shushan Habira, which was sort of the capital, which was enclosed by some sort of a canal or moat or something of the sort, and that's where you had the castle and all the royal functions. So he's got one big party for all the nations, which lasts 180 days, all the states of his empire. Another 7-day party just for the people in Shushan Abira. In other words, just his royal court. So what's the political aim of all this party? I think somebody might have said it, but he's concerned of what?
Loyalty.
Loyalty, exactly. He wants loyalty. He's concerned of both enemies from outside, from all across his empire. So he's trying to get loyalty of all the, as the Megillah says, Sarei Medinot, all the ministers of all the states. But he's also concerned of loyalty from where, very specifically?
Around him.
At home, because there might be a coup inside Shushan Abira. There could be somebody plotting against him. So he's trying to get the loyalty by doing, even after he's done all this 180 days for everybody else, he's doing another 7-day party just for his people. Now, within that 7-day party, there is somebody that ends up showing disloyalty to Achashverosh. And who is that?
His wife.
Vashti.
Vashti, his wife, okay? Which is obviously a very grave offense if the king can't even get his wife to obey a simple request.
But Diane, was
Yeah.
the wife not asked to do very unacceptable things?
Yeah.
Well, it could be. It's not so clear again.
Like, it's not just a simple request she refused. I mean, anything I've read, she was asked to do more than that.
He was asked to do what?
More than that. It wasn't
He was
just a
asked to-
simple request to come to a party.
Yeah, but that's the
It could be
midrash.
different
She's asked to
interpretations.
come. Yeah.
All it says in the Megillah, if we just read it, is that
Yeah.
להביא את ושתי המלכה לפני המלך בכתר המלכות, להראות העמים והשרים את יופה כי טובת מראי. In other words, that he was asked to show, that he wanted to show off her beauty.
Yes, but that's my point. What does that, beauty is,
Okay, so you're right. There are interpretations that, for example, he wanted her to come naked.
yes.
Yeah.
In the Talmud, another suggestion, if I remember correctly from the Talmud, is that Achashverosh's request wasn't so off, but the problem was that she had something that day which made her look inappropriate, and it would have been embarrassing for her to come, like something grew on her or something of the sort.
Yeah. She had boils. They say that she had boils or something.
There are different
Yeah.
interpretations.
Yeah.
It could be that the request was improper. It could be that the request was theoretically proper, but it was like what we would call a bad hair day, so to speak. Whatever the reason was, there are also interpretations that Vashti actually was trying to disrespect Achashverosh because she was the daughter of the according to at least one interpretation, she was the daughter of the Babylonian king, which was the previous empire. And that's why she didn't respect from Achashverosh. Wait a second, there's just a little bit of noise here. That there was some sort of disrespect from Vashti to Achashverosh. Okay, whatever the reason was, bottom line was that
He felt insulted.
yeah, he was very insulted. The king was greatly incensed. His fury burned with him. What justification does his advisors offer to him to remove Vashti?
Everybody's got to listen to their husbands from now on.
Right. So they are trying to show, this is not just a personal insult to Achashverosh. This poses a grave danger to all the husbands in all the kingdom of Achashverosh. That's why, according to Chazal, it's sort of because the idea here was so silly. The ultimate conclusion of the first chapter is that they send an edict to the entire empire, liot kol ish sorer beveito, that every man should wield authority in his home. Okay, so the Talmud says that this edict was so silly that it caused everybody not to take Achashverosh seriously in all his future messages. Anyway, But clearly, what do we see about Achashverosh? What can we learn about this story of Achashverosh? How would you describe him? Is he feeling secure in his position?
No,
No,
and he's very
no.
thin-skinned.
What?
Insecure and weak.
Clearly, a
Yes.
very insecure king, right? If he's
Yeah.
if he gets so flustered over you know, the trouble Vashti gave him at the party, that he feels it necessary to, you know, to send an edict to the entire empire about men wielding authority in their homes. So clearly, he's got some insecurity issues. Okay. Now, let's carry on. Okay. Next story, as we know, we have the whole story about Esther being chosen as the next queen, Achashverosh not being aware of her identity. He probably didn't care too much. I don't think it probably didn't interest him. Okay, and then what happens? We have one very subtle story after Esther gets appointed as queen, sorry, not king. This is a very brief story, but ultimately it turns out to be a critical part of the story of the Megillah, and that is, בימים ההם מרדכי יושב בשער המלך, קצף בקתן ותרש שני סריסי המלך בשופרי הסף, ויבקשו לשלוח יד בחלף הראש. So again, we see clearly Mordechai was very much involved in the royal court, right? He wasn't just a random person sitting in the palace gate. Apparently he was on the inside of what was going on in there. And that's how he was able to uncover this plot of Biktan Vaterish, that plotted to kill Achashverosh, maybe by poisoning his food, according to one interpretation, but they were trying to overthrow Achashverosh. Mordechai finds it out. Every time I get to this piece, I remember I once heard somebody gave a shiur on Biktan v'Teresh, and he sort of was describing the two figures. So he described Teresh as the clever one, and Biktan as sort of the one with the force. Anyway, whatever. It was just very funny. Obviously, there's no indication of any of that, but he was just trying to trying to figure out these two characters, Biktan v'Teresh. Anyway, Mordechai uncovers it, tells it to Esther. Esther reports it to the king in the name of Mordechai. The matter is investigated. It's discovered to be correct, and those two are hung. And this is recorded in the book of Chronicles of the King. Okay, so now there's justification for this insecurity of Achashverosh. We do find an attempt, albeit an unsuccessful one, to take out Achashverosh. Now comes the rise of Haman. Okay, Achashverosh appoints Haman to be what?
His prime minister.
Basically, yeah, he's Achashverosh's man. He's high above anybody else. Now we can imagine if Achashverosh appoints Haman to be this high, then apparently he trusts him. Okay, this is his man. This is the man that he puts his greatest faith in, that he puts him above all the other sarim, any of the other officials. And it says here again, we see the place of Mordechai. So we see again Mordechai, he's walking around where Haman is walking around, and Haman is the highest person in the royal court of Achashverosh. So again, we see the Mordechai apparently had some sort of position where in the royal court, he's walking around there, he's present there. Everybody else is bowing to Haman except for Mordechai. And they're telling him, the Avdei Melech, again, the Avdei Melech could be very high up people in the royal court. They're trying to convince Mordechai not to do it, but Mordechai continues. And we know the story. Haman wants to take out Mordechai. However, he feels that just removing Mordechai won't be enough. So instead, he decides to take out the entire nation of Mordechai, which is the Jewish nation. Okay, and he convinces Achashverosh, plus promises him a hefty sum of money for that, that he will allow him to order on that date all the Jews to be killed. Okay, so now the question is, So how is Mordechai and Esther, what's their plan? How could they get this turned over? Okay. So you're dealing with Haman, who's the highest person in Achashverosh's court. He's the person that Achashverosh trusts the most. Okay. And Achashverosh clearly doesn't care too much for the Jewish people. He hasn't seen Shalom, hi Alan. He hasn't seen Esther in quite some time. In over 30 days, he hasn't called her in, so she's not right now, the person he's most interested in. How are they going to overturn this? How can they change Achashverosh's mind against Haman? What can they do? If you were trying to come up with a plan to try to take out Haman, how would you go about doing it?
Find proof.
What?
Show proof. Proof
Proof of what?
Proof of the plan.
But Achashverosh knows the plan. Haman
No.
Haman made the plan. He asked Achashverosh for permission. He did everything by the book. What crime has Haman committed?
I think all they could do is to pray to Hashem. This is what
Well, they
did.
prayed to Hashem. They certainly did that, but that's not enough, right? That's what Mordechai says to Esther.
But that's why he
Told
to her, told her.
about it. But what is Esther
told
going
her
to do
to-
about it?
She has to go and see the king. She has to go. She has to have an.
Very good. She'll go see the king, but why would the king listen to her over Haman? The king to say to her, "Listen, Esther, your job is to be beautiful. That's why I put you here. Don't meddle in matters of the kingdom. Leave that to the politicians like Haman." How is she going to do that?
The wine is flowing so that he gets inebriated and spills out the beans.
Okay, that's part of the plan to get him drunk, but that's certainly helpful. But what does she need to do to again, Haman is the most powerful person. It's the person that Achashverosh trusts most.
Because he's reading the Chronicles and he sees that Mordechai saved his life, and no, he has never been rewarded.
Okay, but Esther never actually mention Mordechai. You're right that it came to be through the king, but Esther herself never actually mentioned Mordechai.
She had to cast a doubt in his mind about Haman.
What kind of doubt? Excellent. What kind of doubt?
That he was plotting, he was part of,
Oh, very good. In other words, what she needs to do is to feed on Achashverosh's insecurities and try now to point the finger at Haman.
Yeah.
Okay? Now, let's think about how she does that. Okay? That's what she needs to do, apparently. That's the only thing that she has going against Haman, because Haman, again, is the most powerful person. He is loyal to Achashverosh. Haman never actually did anything against Achashverosh. He had some beef with Mordechai. He didn't go rogue to take care of it. He got everything permission by Achashverosh. It's all on the books. That he hasn't done really anything wrong. But she has to somehow feed on these insecurities of Achashverosh to try to turn the tables on Haman. Okay, now let's see, what does she do to do it? Okay, so first of all, she has the 3 days of preparation, the prayers, etc. On the third day, she invites, who does she invite to her party? What?
Haman and Achashverosh.
Haman and Achashverosh. So we have a very unique party that Esther is organizing with only 2 other people invited to it, Achashverosh and Haman. Okay, and nobody knows what the purpose of the party is. What does Haman think about? What is the purpose of the party? Does anybody remember from the Megillah what Haman?
He's so full of himself. He goes and tells his wife, "Look, I've been invited to the party. Only myself."
Invited to be honored.
Exactly. Haman just feels honored. He says, "Incredible! There's a party of the king and the queen with one person invited, and that's me." Okay, it must be because I'm the most beloved and favored person in the kingdom. He goes and boasts about it to his wife. There's only one thing that's bothering him in this whole story, and that is
Jewish people. The Jewish Mordechai and the Jewish people.
Mordechai. He says everything is glorious on earth. I'm the one invitee to a special party by the king and the queen. My only issue in the entire world is that there's this one annoying person, Mordechai, who refuses to bow down to me. Okay, that's the only thing. That's the only thing that Haman has got in his mind, how to get rid of Mordechai. Besides that, the world is perfect. He's completely oblivious to any of Esther's plans. Now let's try to go in the mindset of Hashverosh. Hashverosh, his queen all of a sudden shows up, invites him to a party, plus invites Haman without telling him what the purpose of the party is. Okay, what's he thinking?
That Haman is involved with his wife.
It could be. He doesn't know yet, but
No.
there's something suspicious going on that involves Esther and Haman, and he's not in on it. Okay? Now he shows up to the party. He's probably quite anxious. What does Esther tell him at the party?
She exposes Mordechai. There's an oyev, an enemy in the midst.
No, on the first day. What does she tell him?
Oh, I see. So she just tells him to come back again, even up to
She
half
tells
of
him,
the
she
season.
doesn't tell him what she wants. She
No,
tells
doesn't
him,
say-
come back tomorrow
Yeah.
to another party,
Mm.
okay, with just you and Haman. So what's Achashverosh now? What's going on in his mind at this point in time?
Something going on between them. What is it?
Now he's even more suspicious, right? It's even more anxious. It's like a famous trick that if you want somebody to listen to you, don't tell them right away what is it you want. Tell them, you know, there's something I want to talk to you about, but not now. I'll speak to you about it later or tomorrow. When the person's going crazy, what does he want to speak to me about? Okay, Achashverosh, it's even worse. So she's got him completely thrown off. He's invited to another party, and he has no clue what's going on. So what happens that night? Of course, what happens that night?
She exposes her.
Wait, what happens with Achashverosh that night?
That's the night he gets the reading, the book he wants
Yeah,
to.
why does he get the reading? What does it say?
He couldn't sleep. He couldn't sleep.
He could not sleep.
Exactly. He couldn't sleep. This is not, let's see it inside. Sorry.
There's no dada. The sleep of the king was
Right?
troubled.
This is after Esther invites him. Here it is. At that night, the sleep deserted the king. It's not by chance that he wasn't sleeping that night. It's because he's bothered by something. This is a direct result of what Esther was doing. She was trying to get him to have a sleepless night. She was trying to get him worried. Okay? Now, what is it when he's asking for the book of memories? Why is he calling in for the book of memories? What's he trying to find, essentially?
In case something's gone wrong that he didn't know about.
Yes, I'm sorry. Also, Margaret, you started to say
His
something?
assassin. He knew that there was an attack on him and somebody had saved him.
Right. In essence, he's trying to find out who's loyal to him and maybe who's not loyal to him. Right. This is the Talmud also says in interpretation of this passage, he's not sleeping. He wants to see, is there somebody who's loyal to me that I haven't rewarded? And he discovers that there is. Okay. So he discovers that we have Mordechai, who's clearly demonstrated his loyalty, saving Achashverosh from Biktan Vaterish, and he wasn't rewarded for that loyalty. Okay, which is, in Achashverosh's perspective, is a serious offense. Okay, now Haman shows up. Again, Haman, during this whole time, he's on his one-track mind of how is he going to kill Mordechai. So he's got this big tree that he put up, prepared for Mordechai. And he comes to Achashverosh to get permission to kill Mordechai immediately because he doesn't want to wait until the year passes. He wants to get rid of Mordechai now. Okay, that was the problem with his first plan, that he would have to wait a year until it gets carried out. So now he wants Mordechai killed now, but he needs permission from Achashverosh to do that. The king at that time, what does he tell Haman to do? He asks, you know, what do you do with the king, that the man that a king desires to honor? Haman is sure that he's referring to him. And he says this whole business of, and now look at what Haman requests, okay? Haman, what does he ask? What does he say should be done? He says,
Where in-
יביאו לבוש מלכות אשר לבש בו המלך, וסוס אשר רכב עליו המלך ואשר ניתן כתר מלכות בראשו. He should give the royal garb which the king has worn be brought, and the horse on which the king is ridden, and has whose head the loyal diadem, another loyal crown has been set. What's essentially Haman asking for the reward?
to be king.
To be dressed up as king, it seems. Okay? This also, again, Haman probably didn't mean any insult to Achashverosh here, but if you're in Achashverosh's mindset, again, because you have to think of the two different mindsets. Haman is a mindset of the king is looking to honor me, everybody's looking to honor me, everybody's so fabulous. The only problem I have is Mordechai. Achashverosh, though, is in a different situation. He's now testing people. And one of the people he's put his sights on is Haman, because Haman has been invited to this party, and he's the only person that might be in on what's going on. Okay, so now Achashverosh has got a cloud of suspicion around him. He thinks that there's this Mordechai he can trust. And now Haman is not sure of. So when he's asking Haman, what do you do to reward such a person? Again, if you're thinking about from Achashverosh's perspective, apparently there's a bit of a test here. Haman doesn't do very well, because Haman essentially says we should dress up that person as king, which doesn't sound too good. So immediately the king puts him to shame, and he now commands him that he must now do this to Mordechai, which is obviously, the greatest shame that could come about Haman, which is what happens at the end. Okay, after he takes Mordechai on the horse with the garb and everything, he comes into his house, avel v'chafui rosh, his head covered in mourning. Okay, not much time passes. He gets invited to the party with Esther. And what does Esther now tell?
Somebody's trying to kill my people.
Achashverosh, but she doesn't just say somebody's trying to kill my people, because again, if we think about it, Achashverosh doesn't really care about these people. He permitted killing all of them.
Someone
Okay.
wants to
Her own life. She talks about her own. She said myself.
Right.
She
She's
talks about
saying, "Ki nimkarnu ani ve'ami lashmidu lo again." For we have been sold, my people and I, to be destroyed, massacred, and exterminated. Okay. Now she's always emphasizing, "Tinaten li nafshi b'shelati ve'ami b'vakashati." She's essentially saying the plan to kill the nation is essentially a plan to kill
your queen.
me as well, the queen. In other words, Haman, essentially what she's insinuating is that Haman attempting to kill the Jews is an attempt to kill the queen as well. Again, Mordechai doesn't really care about the Jews. But if somebody's trying to take out his queen, that means that somebody's moving against him. Okay? Now, is this true? Is what she said here true? Was Haman really trying to take out Esther?
no, because he didn't know.
He didn't know.
No.
He didn't know. This is not true. What she's accusing Haman of, or what she's insinuating Haman was trying to do,
He didn't know.
is not true. It never happened. Haman had no clue. He had no business with Esther. He had no idea that she was Jewish. All he knew was about Mordechai, and that's who he was interested in.
But sorry, Diane, how could he not know she was Jewish? I often wonder that when she was in Mordecai's house and was thought to be his family, how could, the people not know who she was?
It's a good question. I mean, there are all kinds of theories about what exactly went on with Mordechai and Esther. Even Mordechai, apparently, it wasn't a well-known idea that he was Jewish. If you look there closely at the story,
Right.
it says,
Yeah.
So apparently this whole issue wasn't so evident. So, and then somehow, apparently, they were able to keep it secret. And again, like I said, she was taken to the court in like this parade of women. Probably all they were interested in was in their appearance, not much more than that. I mean, that was the whole sort of idea of finding a queen that way. And, that's it. So, and Haman certainly had no interest in Esther. All he had was Mordechai. And the whole communication between Mordechai and Esther also seems to have been done a bit secretive. So they were able to do it. But now Haman's got a big problem, because now Esther is essentially telling Hashverosh, and again, Hashverosh he's got all this buildup of insecurities from all this this pressure, that Esther until she reveals him, and now she's pointing the finger at Haman. Now, what's Haman's response? What happens now? Does Haman have an opportunity to plead his case?
Well, no, because the king leaves he goes to the Gina, and then he falls on her, and the king then comes back and finds him in a very sort of improper.
Right. So now the king comes out. He gets all upset. He walks outside. Right. So Haman doesn't yet have a chance to speak to the king. He now pleads, sort of leaning on the bed of Esther, and Achashverosh comes back in, and he sees now Haman on the bed of Esther. So now this all fits in with the puzzle. Okay. Hagam lichbosh et hamalkai babait. You're trying to ravish the queen in my own palace. Okay. Haman can't speak. Ufnei Haman chafu. Right. The words leave, and Haman can't respond. And then what happens? The next thing is Charvona shows up, and he says, "Oh, גם הנה העץ אשר עשה המן למרדכי אשר דיבר טוב על המלך עומד בבית המן גבוה 50 אמה ויאמר המלך תנו עליו." Now Charvona puts in the final piece of the puzzle, right, to prove Haman guilty, and he says, here is the tree that Haman put up to kill Mordechai, who's the most loyal person to the king, who saved the king's life. Okay. Now, again, Haman has no idea about this. This is like one of these Kafka plays where you've got this, this whole thing happening, and the person is standing, but he can't do anything about it. Okay? All this incriminating build-up evidence against Haman, that he's trying to take out the queen, and that he's trying to take out Mordechai. And all of this is really a plot by Haman to go against who? To go against Achashverosh, right? That's the story that we know. Why is he taking out the Jewish people? Because he's trying to take out the queen, the wife of Achashverosh. Why is he trying to take out Mordechai? Mordechai is Asher Diber Tov al HaMelech. He's the person who's loyal to the king. So Esther has essentially, what she's managed to do here is build up this whole line of evidence against Haman, which is all completely false. False in the sense Haman was loyal to Achashverosh. He wasn't loyal. And Haman never even has an opportunity to present his case and to try to prove his innocence. He's dead. He's immediately dead before he has a chance to respond. Okay, and that's the genius of Esther, how she managed to take out Haman. Okay, just our time is up, so just a final point on this. So what, after all we said, what's the message of Purim? So there are several messages here. First of all, one is this tremendous story of Esther, how she rose up to the occasion to save the Jewish people. She used, with great cleverness, she managed to maneuver the great court of Achashverosh and to manipulate him to save the Jewish people and bring Mordechai to power. That's one part of the event. Another part, which I think is that, we've had a lot of situations in Jewish history that, we've been in grave trouble, even suffered greatly. In the story of Purim, there was this very devious, horrendous plot against us, and we were saved unscathed completely. And that's part of the message. Although you have all this, seemingly what's going on, Hashem is never mentioned in the Megillah. You've got these inner battles of a royal court, insecurities, drinking, women, a lot of stuff going on here, which is very improper. But really, the person who's, not the person, but rather the one who's really manipulating all the events at the end is Hashem. That's sort of lurking behind the scenes here. And that's the message that we try to take. And we hope each time we'll come saved out of the story as we did on Purim, right? Completely unscathed. That's why we want to immortalize that event. We want all these times of troubles to end up like Purim, in a fantastic salvation with everybody coming out unharmed. But, that's sort of what we're looking for, that divine providence, which guides us and helps us also, not just by miracles, but also like Esther did on her, with her cleverness and ingenuity to try to save the day. And that's one of the messages of Purim, that Hashem is always looking out for us, and He's giving us the ability to rise up to the occasion when needed, and to save ourselves from these horrific dangers.
Thank you.
Okay. Any questions or comments?
I just want to say I was so riveted by this that I've nearly burnt all my Hobmantaschens. I was making, I forgot. That's why I left the room just now.
Yes.
Oh,
Harav
Ralph,
Shalom.
Shalom.